I'm Brent Peterson, a customer success strategist here at ClientSuccess. During today's webinar, we'll cover a maturity model that will help you scale your customer success strategies and teams. We'll start by introducing the pillars of the maturity model. Then we will cover people and culture, process and journey, metrics, technology, segmentation, and we will end with a Q&A section. We will be recording the webinar today, and it will be sent to your inbox on Monday, June 26th. Feel free to use the hashtag customer success to involve the customer success community on Twitter. It's my pleasure today to welcome Dave Blake, CEO and founder of ClientSuccess. ClientSuccess is a customer success management platform that helps leaders and CSMs retain and grow their customer base. Dave will lead the webinar discussion today. If you have questions at any time, please feel free to ask them using the Q&A window. We'll do our best to answer as many of the questions as possible. We will likely answer a few during the process and save time at the end to answer your questions. Welcome to the webinar today, everybody. Dave, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Brent, and welcome everybody. We are grateful to have you join us today, wherever you may be in the world. It looks like we have a lot of old friends joining us again and new friends joining us for the first time today. As Brent said, we're going to talk about a customer success maturity model and really give some insights and perspectives of how to build and scale customer success teams. I have the pleasure of sharing some of my own perspective as well as the perspective of many of the customers and thought leaders and professionals in the customer success space. As Brent said, I'm founder and CEO of ClientSuccess. We have a passion of building solutions and technology for customer success teams. But prior to that, I had the opportunity to build and scale teams at Omniture and then Adobe. And so a lot of what we'll share today will come from that experience of building and scaling through many different teams and different perspectives that we've gained and that we like to share for our customers and friends in the customer success community. So let me introduce the model from a high level that we'll talk about today. We're going to talk about high-level principles and best practices on how to scale a customer success team and build a culture of customer success at your organization. We'll talk about 7 main pillars: people, culture, process, journey, metrics, technology, and segmentation. And we'll talk about and share insights about how we typically see each of these pillars scale from 4 different scaling or maturity levels. One is startup. The next we'll refer to as emerging, scaling, and then enterprise. Startup is usually somebody who is at seed stage or maybe early Series A. Emerging is typically Series A and B. Scaling is usually Series C and above, and enterprise is typically a public company. As part of the first questions we wanted to pose to the group we'd like to add a poll to see for the audience today, what level are you at? Would you say that you're startup, emerging, scaling, or enterprise? And Brent will post that poll there. So let's jump in. I'm going to go ahead and jump in on people. So we'll talk about people. Obviously, people is the most important part of the process. Your foundation is on your people. If you have great people, you'll typically have great success. And so as it starts with people, we'll talk a little bit about how we typically see a team evolve over time through these different stages. And so typically as you see in a startup, there's really not, many times there's not even a customer success team, although we see lately, earlier and earlier stage companies are adding customer success professionals as some of the first professionals on the team. But typically what you see as a founder, you often see the founding team having this round robin tag teaming impact to try to take care of customers and maybe have one simple support rep. Then emerging teams, they typically hire a leader. They start adding team members, usually around the size of 1 to 15 team members. And then they start segmenting their customer success function from support, as they're very different functions with different metrics and different objectives. Teams that are scaling then add a VP of customer success. They add more managers to the team and grow the team large. And then finally, enterprise customers teams usually have a chief customer officer that the entire team reports into, and also tend to add an operations team. Now, again, as I go through this maturity model, your company may progress through this scale much faster. So you may be an emerging company that has a chief customer officer or a VP of customer success, and that's fine. This is typically just how you see teams evolve throughout as they build their first customer success teams and scale it over time. Now, there's two key components that you think about when your team is, how do I scale CSMs to manage our customer load, and how do I compensate our CSMs? A few best practices that we often share is that in the industry, it's often said that on the right-hand side here, that a rule of thumb is that each CSM should manage $2 million in ARR. And that's generally a great rule of thumb. However, if you have large customers and are managing strategic accounts, you may have a CSM manage much more than that. If you have very small customers with small dollar size, you may have CSMs manage a smaller book of business than that. Typically, I see that it is about 50 clients. Once a CSM has about 50 clients, you need some kind of automation. They can't possibly manage 50 relationships in a very proactive way. And so that's the tipping point where you typically need technology and some kind of automation to help proactively manage your customer base. The model on the left shows you how to think about this scaling of customers to CSM ratio. And so on the left, you'll see that we've got on the y-axis, you've got high contract value versus low contract value, and then low numbers of accounts that a CSM could manage up to high. And so as you can see, the higher the contract value, the fewer number of customers that you may want your CSM to manage, because you're typically in a strategic account mode. And then also the lower the contract value, you probably see CSMs manage most. The other factor that you want to look is the diagonal, is product complexity, because that adds another layer of complexity to consider. The higher the complexity, the lower number of customers that you want your CSMs to manage. So these are some rules of thumb and model to consider as you work through the appropriate and the optimal client to CSM to customer ratio for managing your customer base. The next aspect that we often hear is, hey, I've started building my team. How do I compensate them, my people, to make sure that we're rewarding them? There's a lot of discussions out there and a lot of thoughts around this. It could be a webinar on its own, and we may do that in the future. But I typically see in the market three models. One is model one is just CSMs have a base salary only. I've certainly had in my early days of building teams, that's what we had. Model two is that you see CSMs have a base and a bonus, some kind of bonus on top of their base. And the third one is that you have a base with a variable. I actually like and propose the third model. And the reason why is that it allows the CSMs to have some upside in all their efforts. And typically, what I like to see is a model based on this, and let me explain this. On the left-hand side, you could see a typical sales compensation plan where they may have 40% base, 60% variable. On the right is a CSM compensation plan. In this case, I'm suggesting 75% base to 25% variable. What I like to do is take the variable component here on the CSM, it's a 25%, and mirror the same ratio, same mix on the variable component to have 75% of it on retention and 25% on growth. That way, it's very clear on what the CSM's primary responsibility is. It's around retention, but also considers the fact that you want to give upside for any expansion that they're able to influence or drive. Sometimes on the sales side, I like to have it just the opposite, so that you've got this collaborative approach where the sales counterparts might consider having, if they're involved post-sales, they might consider having 75% of their compensation plan on growth and 25% on retention, so that you have this collaborative model with compensation plans. So those are two things. As you think about people, how do you typically scale your team? How do you define your ratios, and then how do you compensate your team? Let's move on to culture. And so when we talk about culture, this is a critical part, because you've got a team. Now, how do you engage and build a culture of customer success? And so typically what you see in startups is that the culture is more centered around product market fit. It's about customer acquisition. It's a scrappy success culture, meaning there's not a lot of repetitive process. It's just doing whatever you can to try to get new customers and take care of the customers that you have. As teams continue to merge, the customer success team is created, but the success, if you will, the success culture is somewhat siloed. The customer success team has that as their primary responsibility, but they're still a fairly siloed team, and where they're focused on their individual functional groups and their primary roles and responsibilities, and there's not as much collaboration. But over time, that starts to change. They start to understand the importance of taking care of customers and that it's a team sport. So you start to get more of a customer-first mentality, celebrating wins on the post-sales side, just like you do on the sales side, and then a broader cross-functional collaboration around customers. We like to see customers, teams start to do that earlier, even in startup or emerging phases, but there's a level of maturity that happens over time that this really starts to become embedded throughout the fabric of the organization. And then finally, you see enterprises, the best enterprises are united as a company around customer success-centric KPIs, and the overall customer experience, and measuring that and united in driving an excellent customer experience. We say that customer success is not a department, it's a company culture. And I would say if we were to poll the group, how many of your companies really exemplify this? Do you have a true culture of customer success? We see a mixed bag in the industry today. We see some that really get it, some that think it's an afterthought, and some that have embraced it fully to where the customers are truly come first, and the organization, all functional groups are very actively engaged, driving a great customer experience, helping them achieve their outcomes, and driving high retention and growth. Typically, as you see the evolution, if you start over here, again, as I mentioned, you mainly focus on product market fit, which is really important. But once you start focusing on accelerating customer acquisition, then you start getting as your customer base grows, you start building your base metrics. You've got a VP that represents the customer on the executive team. The board starts getting engaged. You have cross-functional initiatives. And then a very organized and collaborative cross-functional alignment, and then you drive this empowerment throughout the organization to where anybody in the organization can make a decision that will impact the customer in a positive way or solve a problem on the spot. And there's nothing better. I think all of you can think of examples of customer experiences. Somebody on the front line did something extraordinary to take care of you, and that's where you start to see that customer success is truly a culture, is when they're empowered to do the extraordinary for their customers. Next, we'll talk a little bit about process. And so processes, as we look at it early days, it's really much more ad hoc and reactive. There's not a lot of process being built around the customer early on. It's really a few resources who are doing their best to take care of customers. They're building out ad hoc process, and it's somewhat a reactive mode. Eventually, you start seeing a focus on different areas of the customer journey. So typically, you see the process of onboarding being the first area of focus, where you start building out formal process and metrics and insights. Then there's an implementation process. If those are broken into two functional groups, you have a support process, and you have some basic metrics. Then you start to say, okay, we're going to look at how can we make repeatable process across the entire customer journey that that delivers a consistent experience for the customer, that we can measure how we're executing and optimize over time. And that's a real exciting stage in a customer's in the evolution here, is when you start to get this repeatable methodology across the life cycle. And over time, it may get to the point where you start breaking out to specialized teams. This may happen earlier, but over time, it usually starts breaking out to specialized teams where you have a specialized onboarding team, an operational team, maybe an implementation team, and even a renewal team. And those processes and teams are really focused around the customer experience. This is the typical maturity model. And you want to go up this maturity model as quickly as possible. So you take your reactive processes, and some of you may on the call may have that. You feel very reactive in nature, and maybe just the organization maybe feel on their toes. And then you start to translate that to proactive methodology. How do you get in front of the customer? How do you anticipate their needs? Then you find how you repeat that in a consistent way. How do you measure it? How do you collaborate as a team? And then have a very predictive outcome of the processes that you're delivering. So can you predict that if you engage with customers this way consistently over time, that you're going to have this level of outcome, either in high NPS coming out of onboarding, or specifically, hopefully, high prediction of retention and growth. And then over time, you have this transformative process where it transforms your organization to the next level that you haven't been on before. Moving on, and we'll talk a little bit about the journey. We've kind of had some concepts around the customer journey throughout the previous sections, but we'll dive a little bit deeper in here, and we'll talk a little bit about the customer journey. And so typically in the early stage, the early stage companies have a limited or siloed and fragmented journey, meaning there is very basic things that you're accomplishing for your customers, but again, it's in the customer success team or support team may own those. It may not be this smooth journey over the entire first year of the customer process. But then as you start to mature and build out a better process and map this out, you start focusing on onboarding, implementation, and the renewals journey. You start to get, as you scale, start thinking proactively, and you start executing across the life cycle, across all teams, where every team member understands their role in delivering a great experience for the customer. And then over time, you've got a very comprehensive customer journey that may be mapped from first time a prospect interacts with your brand all the way through the lifetime of the customer. And with that, it's measured, it's tracked, and it's optimized over time to deliver the best experience. Now, hopefully all of you are familiar with the customer journey mapping. This is a really popular topic in the space right now. Customer journey mapping is a process of really understanding and mapping out how to deliver an amazing experience for your customer across all functional groups, starting with first brand impression and going through, in this example, through the renewal. We've seen companies that have taken a week and they've either gone off-site or they've taken a whole conference room and whiteboarded and used sticky notes and mapped this out in great detail with a cross-functional group. And that's what I suggest. I know that at Adobe, we had a customer listening post where it was a conference room dedicated to understanding the customer experience, to mapping it out, to refining and optimizing it. I know another company called Observe Point has done a similar thing, and we see that more and more often, that people dedicate rooms in their office space to really understanding and discussing the customer journey. The one common mistake we often see, though, is that people who go through this exercise as a company leave it from the perspective of the company, meaning you're mapping out what the customer experience should be, but you're doing it from an inside view. You're looking internal, you're using your own perspective. And the mistake is that they don't include the customer in that exercise. And so you may be able to map out what you think is a great experience as a company, but if it doesn't align to your customer's needs, and it doesn't meet their expectations and doesn't help them drive to their optimal outcomes, it could fail. And so one of the best practices that we always recommend is engaging the customer or a few select customers in the process and help try to understand their perspective and map their perspective and their needs and take that into account as part of this entire exercise. That will make your customer journey mapping exercise much stronger and make sure that you're aligned to your customers. I love this statement from Disney. It's a principle that Disney uses, is that there's always this comment about who owns the customer, and Disney would say everybody owns the customer, and to make sure that somebody always owns the moment. And so as you map out your customer journeys, make sure you always know who owns the moment, who is the primary driver in that moment. CSMs take that responsibility on with pride, but there may be other times during the journey that somebody might own the critical moments, and make sure that you nail those moments and deliver what you want and what your customer expects during those key moments of truth. Okay, moving on. Yeah, go ahead.
Before you move on to metrics, I have a question here. The question is, what tips and suggestions do you have to get executives and the C-suite on board with branding a company as client success focused, sales focused?
Yeah, I think it's if you're trying to change the focus and the culture and the brand of a company, I believe it won't work unless the CEO is on board. And so usually it starts with the CEO. The CEO really understands and believes and is the flag bearer of that mentality, of that culture. Then it typically will flow down to the rest of the organization. So I would say start with your CEO. If your CEO is not visiting customers and going on site regularly, then I would bring your CEO on site more often, and the rest of his executive team. I would make sure that all the senior leaders are engaged. We had an experience at Adobe where they implemented a program called the Customer Immersion Program, and it transformed Adobe. And what they did is they created a simulated experience to really understand the customer experience from their shoes. And so Adobe required all of their senior executives to go through a two-day program that had them go to our website and try to find things, to use our products, to look at contracts, to speak with customers in a very candid way. And I was fortunate to be a part of that program and help with that. And it was interesting as we saw the senior leaders go through that, the lights turned on across the entire senior leadership group, and including the CEO, Shantanu Narayan, who had a different perspective. And from that day forth, he was a different CEO, and he was very customer focused before, but this even raised that level of interest and focus going forward. And so it start with the senior leadership team, make sure that they believe in that, and then it will typically flow through to the rest of the organization. The last thing I would say is also establish a measurement structure that helps measure it, because sometimes what is measured is accomplished, and that's really important as well.
Okay, excellent. Dave, I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll based on that, on customer success as a culture.
Okay, so if you have a few minutes, 1 second, maybe give your inputs about your company. Do you feel like that they've adopted customer success as a culture, or are they still working through that? Is that an area of improvement in your own company? And why would we get your feedback there? I'm going to go on to the next section, which is about metrics. Now, we recently did, and metrics is a big topic as well. We recently hosted a webinar on this topic, but typically what you see on metrics is that the initial startups, it's more focused on sales, MRR, ARR, customer count, and basic health. It may be just red, yellow, green. If we look at our early customers, are they red? Are they yellow? Are they green? How many are there? What's the revenue that we've gained? And then as they merge, they start to formalize and build out the framework to capturing the standard SaaS metrics around usage, around retention, around growth. Those are some of the three most common categories that people look at, in addition to the basic health metrics. And eventually, some of the more sophisticated companies start leveraging technology or leveraging in-house resources to start building out predictable modeling around customer metrics, around post-sales metrics, and forecasting very accurately around renewals. I know I have a very close friend and customer success leader who has his team forecasting at an accuracy of 1 or 2% per quarter, which is amazing from a renewal rate perspective. And so those are some of the more sophisticated teams. And then eventually they have a whole framework of advanced analytics and predictive analytics. When you talk about metrics, there's a lot of metrics to have. And our suggestion is always to start with basics. Start with the basics. I just got off a call with a leader earlier this morning asking about metrics. And we said, you know what, just start with some simple metrics. Start with retention numbers, gross and net retention. Start with renewal numbers, gross and net renewal, and those two are different metrics. And start with logo churn, logo retention. And so those, start with the basics. There's different types of metrics. And again, we have a great white paper and another webinar, if you want to watch it another time, that talks about some best practices around metrics. But there's core success metrics around ARR and MRR and churn and retention and lifetime value. There's different analyses, which we'd call analyses, around churn analysis, cohort analysis, downsell analysis. There's engagement metrics around how your customers are engaging with your product, how your customers are engaging with your team, and how your team is engaging with your customers. And then finally, there's subjective metrics. Now, and that can be as easy as red, yellow, green. But there's a couple things I would say about subjective metrics. Now, one is that we often hear a lot of people who downplay subjective metrics because there's a level of error across the team of whether that will be accurate. We've actually found the opposite to be true. Those teams who have a level of subjective input from their team have a very good handle on their customer health. And when you combine it with other objective data, other data sets, it really becomes strong. If you only use a data-driven metrics, you could get a false positive or false negative read on the customer health. And so we recommend adding, if you can scale it, adding a subjective measure of health from your team. And when you do so, make sure that as they're changing the status from red to yellow to green, you're also capturing reason codes so that you can understand what are the common trends that might put somebody into yellow or that may cause an account to go red. The reason codes and keeping it consistently updated are the key to using subjective metrics. So to start small, focus on some core metrics initially, and get those down very well, and really understand how those are reflected in your business, and then expand from there. Okay, we'll move on to technology. Technology is a key thing. We've been fortunate in the customer success space over the last several years to have some great technology come to market. When I was a customer success leader, I had a very cobbled approach of a bunch of technologies, and that's typically what you see. Typically, early on, you see no technology other than people managing their customers out of email, out of calendar, and maybe out of spreadsheets, and maybe a CRM. Maybe you're the CRM that's been selected as a company. Eventually, you start to see you have these disparate and siloed systems. You add a little bit of maturity, but you've eventually start adding more and more technology to where you've got this cobbled together approach and a lot of manual insights or difficult insights to get because they're across many disparate siloed systems. Many companies these days are buying customer success management solutions like our solution, ClientSuccess, that helps teams build and scale their team to manage repeatable methodology and then have the insights and analytics that are important to understand health and customer, all your customer metrics. And over time, there's even broader capability, maybe very advanced automations, integrations with other technology to bring that data into other areas, and then have a lot of advanced workflows and analytics. This is what that most of the seasoned customer success professionals on the call may be very familiar with, and also most of the companies out there are still doing this. They have this cobbled together approach to retention, where they may have their CRM and they may bring MPS from another solution, marketing automation, analytics, support tickets, and email, and try to bring all this together and be managing across multiple systems and multiple insights, and so that it becomes a very difficult way to proactively manage your customers. And again, we're all fortunate these days to have great customer success technology in the space that brings together a platform of capabilities that integrates all these different data sources into one, and really drives the execution across the team, the scaling across the team, and the insights across the team, and hopefully breaks down the barriers across the entire organization to help drive that culture of customer success. And we're ClientSuccess is honored to be one of these platforms and have a passion about building technology for customer success teams. The last pillar that we'll talk about today is segmentation. And so it's really important to consider how you segment your customers. And what we typically see is that there's no segmentation. It's maybe prioritized on a few key accounts that are closed in the early days that you must save at all costs. And a lot of times it's a squeaky wheel syndrome, where those that are speaking the loudest get the most attention and the prioritization. Eventually you start doing basic segmentation. It may be as basic as our large clients and our small clients. That may be as basic as it is. And then they start to prioritize a little bit more on that, is how can we take care of this customer segment differently or better than others, because for whatever business reason. And you start having basic processes. Over time, you start to see segmentation by size, to where you have mid-market, enterprise, and strategic. Territory, to where you might have US and EMEA, or West Coast, East Coast, etc. You might have specialized teams and strategies, and that's really important. And then eventually you start to get to this global segmentation by size, by geography, by different verticals, and you have advanced specialization across those teams, meaning you might have a media team that handles all of the media customers in that, and they have expertise in the media vertical. The key point that is really important to understand about segmentation is that as you grow and scale, you can't treat every customer the same. There's no cookie cutter approach that typically works, but you can segment your customers in different segmentation models and build very specialized strategies of how to take care of those customers in very unique ways, so that they feel and their needs are met, but you execute it in very specialized ways. So whether you start at the top, you have no specialization or segmentation, and as you go down this and you start segmenting based on geography or industry, the key thing is to segment as early as you can. It may be at 50 or 100 customers, you start having basic segmentation. You may hire different talent to take care of different segments, and build very specific strategies for this segment. A lot of them, a very basic way that we often hear in the market is as high touch to tech touch, or tech touch to high touch. You would, on the tech touch side or very low touch model, you may have different resources. It may not be a dedicated CSM. It may be more analysts and marketing individuals who take care of that low touch segment. Where on the very high touch side, you may have very, very experienced, seasoned strategic account managers that are on site, that are badged with your customers, that are very, can go high and wide in the organization. But regardless of which route you have, start with a level of segmentation, and then as you build segments and segment your customers, make sure that you're building strategy that meets the needs of those segments in a scalable way, and including reporting team members and those things. So it's a really important thing to remember as you scale your team. So we talked through the different segmentation model. We talked about people, process, technology, metrics, customer journey, and segmentation, and we talked about scaling there. We'd love to take some questions and answer some of the questions that have been submitted online, and we'll do that at that time. Brent, I'll have you lead us through that the Q&A section.
Thanks, Dave. I think we should start with an observation made by a couple of our participants here. And I'll paraphrase and then ask the question, but we've heard from a couple folks that there's often a temptation to focus on somewhat self-serving measurements and KPIs. So I guess the question we need to answer here is, what are some of the more customer-centric KPIs, and how do we measure from the customer's point of view whether they're being successful with our products and services?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question, and I highly agree. I think if you take an outside-in view, meaning you put on the lens of the customer, it's really important to understand how you're taking care of them, because if they're successful leveraging your platform, then naturally the metrics on your side will take care of it. So there's a bunch of different types of ways to do that. One way is simple NPS and CSAT, which I believe are very valuable metrics, but are very limited in scope and in context. But it's still, you should have some kind of voice of customer metrics, such as those NPS or CSAT. The other way is to create customer advisory boards and leverage those customer advisory boards to have honest discussions about their experience. That's another way, and to be measure that. And then other ways that are to look at things like we do at ClientSuccess, we love to do is capturing customers' key business objectives. We call them KBOs from day one. We usually start capturing those in the sales cycle, and then we refine those on the first welcome call to understand what are the key business objectives or outcomes that the customers want to achieve, and then measuring how quickly and how effectively you can achieve those objectives. And so it was really gratifying for us, for one of our CSMs to inform me the other day that one of our newer customers, within the first 90 days, we've already achieved the key business objectives that they outlined on the onboarding call. And so that was neat. And I think those are some ways to get a customer first measurement perspective about their experience.
Excellent. And one point of clarification here. We've presented this maturity model based on company life cycle, startup, emerging, scaling, enterprise. And some of our participants have pointed out that just because I'm an enterprise does not necessarily mean that my customer success processes are as mature as they might be for an enterprise. So quick comment is simply that what we're showing here is that at any level that your company is, that's kind of the level of maturity that your customer success processes can reach. And it's a good way to ask yourself, just how mature am I compared to my company maturity?
Yeah, I think great clarification there, Brent, and sorry for not pointing that out. I think this is just the evolution of how you might build process and people and scale that from the first team. It doesn't reflect on the leadership. Even experienced leaders and experienced teams and experienced companies will typically even go through that kind of maturity as they build and scale, because it takes the time to put in the process, the methodologies, the technologies, and the measurement in order to do so.
Excellent. Another question here, Dave. Why do new customer success operations or initiatives often fail within the first 12 to 16 months?
I think it's because there's not the broad buy-in from cross collaboration or cross-functional teams. And so we often see a real challenge, we believe, in the market right now, in the space right now, is that that companies will, quote, buy into customer success by hiring a customer success team, but they really haven't empowered that team. They really haven't engaged cross-functionally and broke down some of the common silos and walls between different organizations. And so I think the key is having a CEO that's on board, and then building a cross-functional team that owns that. Maybe somebody designated from every single department who is empowered and driven to ensure that there's cross-functional collaboration. And I think that those companies that are most successful are able to do that effectively, and you'll have that long-term staying power of the initiative.
Great. And another question here. How do you prove ROI of a customer success practice to the executives or to the board? Is it just stability of retention, increase of upsell, cross-sell, or are there some other ways to show ROI?
I think the simplest way to show it is from the metrics that they care most about, which usually a board and executive team are looking very closely at retention of the existing customer base and expansion. And I think the best way is to drive to customers' needs to where you see expansion accelerating. You see that the percentage of expansion revenue over time is a great sign. One, that you've got great product market fit and you have a great product, but also that the customer success team is able to engage customers in a way that delivers to their needs through the product and through the overall customer experience. And so those are the most simple way to do that. There's other metrics, advocacy activities, and those types of things. But I think those are the cores that most are interested in.
Great. Another question here. With a low-touch one-to-many model, do you think NPS is effective?
My opinion on NPS is it is one input to understand the customer experience, but shouldn't be relied on as the singular measurement of customer satisfaction or predictor of retention. I am a believer of NPS as an input, and I personally like to see the responses, but a lot of times they can be flawed in that there's different levels of people who respond. They may be in a different mood today, a happy mood today, or a frustrating mood today, and that may impact the score. And so I think you put everything, you don't rely on one thing, you put that in context with other data, and that gives you a great measurement. So yes, a good tool to use in a low-touch model, but not the only tool to rely on in that model.
Awesome. Another question here. How do you differentiate between an account manager and a customer success rep?
That's a great question. I think when I was at Omniture and Adobe, we used the title account manager, which is the equivalent of what everybody uses today for customer success. And that's evolved, and customer success manager or client success manager seems to be the most common title used out there for professionals who drive adoption, onboarding, adoption, and long-term retention. What we see lately is that the term account manager is typically used for the traditional farmer role, and in today's world, it's more for those who are in charge of the renewal and expansion within the existing customer base. So you may have an account executive who's focused on new executives, and you may have an account manager on new customers or new logos. You may have an account manager who's really the farmer driving renewals and expansion, and a CSM within an account. But that's typically what we see that title used for today.
Great. And then a follow-on question to that is, between the two roles of a CSM and account manager, how do you divide up the work?
That's a great question, and the way I've seen it best work is that one is you've got to really clearly define the roles and responsibilities to the customer, because always the customer first, and they want to really understand who to go to for what. And so the way to make it successful is clearly define that internally, roles and responsibilities, clearly define that to the customer, and then create compensation models and collaboration environment where they will work together. What I've often seen is that it's very clear that you explain to the customer that the account manager is responsible for anything related to contract or sales or contractual renewals or anything. The CSM is responsible for everything around adoption, driving to your business requirements, etc. And then if there's an internal environment where it fosters that collaboration, it becomes a beautiful thing that the customer knows the differences, and they work together, and they both, you have this three-way success where the customer is successful, the AM is successful, and the CSM is successful.
Great. Lots of great questions. We sure appreciate it. We'll get to as many of these as we can. At what point in the CS lifecycle do you typically find it's appropriate to invest the time and resources required on technology?
The question was, at what stage is it time to invest? Is that what it was, Brent?
It is. Yep. What point in the stage or life cycle?
Yeah, that's a great question. It just depends. I think we see companies as early as having their first one or two customer success managers decide to invest in customer success technology. And the logic there is, let's start from the beginning and leverage technology to ensure that we have a strong foundation of customer success going forward, and build upon that, scale upon, leverage the technology to build and scale the methodology, the workflows, and the team. And so we see it as early as that. I think that it's about that 5 to 10 range, which is the optimal time. When you have 5 or 10 CSMs, that's when you start feeling the pain points. Usually when your company starts having the budget and the ability and the resources to move forward with a solution, customer success solution like ours.
Excellent. And another one here that I'll paraphrase. One attendee mentioned that in regards to segmentation, there can sometimes cause hard feelings when someone feels that they're segmented into a lower segment. So the question is, do you ever make the segmentation public, or is segmentation internal only?
You know, I generally avoid speaking about the segmentation public unless it is a strategic account and you're letting them know that they're a strategic account. So usually it works in that case for more strategic accounts. It works to in some cases to let them know they are a strategic customer and what that means. But it can backfire as the attendee suggested for anyone else. And so I typically try to do everything we can to segment our customers and build a strategy for those segments that they feel important, that they feel like their needs are met and that they're getting the level of service that they want, and keep the segmentation internal.
Great. And Dave, I'd like to get to 2 more questions here.
Okay.
First question is, do you have any thoughts on CSM as a revenue center versus a cost center?
Yes, a great question, and love that question. If done right, a CSM team, a customer success team, should be a revenue center. And one example, one of our customers who has been with us for a while, said that with his current company and leveraging technology, our technology and other things, it was the first time as a leader, and I think he had been a CS leader at 2 or 3 other companies, that their company really saw their customer team as a revenue center, and they're delivering as a revenue center. And so definitely agree that they should be viewed as a revenue center versus a cost center, and the team should work towards that as they execute as well.
One final question, and I'll paraphrase here again. The question is about when is it the right time to hand off some of the support responsibilities to a support rep versus leaving all support with customer success?
I'd say as soon as you can, because the roles and responsibilities, although they could be all wrapped around a general term of customer success, they're all helping customers with their needs and their questions. The roles and responsibilities and measurements and even the profile of people you hire can be very different. And so as soon as you can segment those, I would measure both of them with very specific measurement for support and very specific measurement and metrics for customer success. And then try to optimize the support team to take as much of the tactical day-to-day and reactive responsibilities off the plate of the CSM, so that the CSM can focus on proactive value-add activities to help customers achieve their objectives.
Thanks, Dave. And thank you, everyone. A lot of great questions, some of which we will probably not have time to answer here today, but would love to answer. As we previously mentioned, a recorded version of this webinar will be emailed to you. And ClientSuccess is here to help. We are incredibly passionate about helping you deliver value for customers through customer success processes. Because of our passion, we've built industry-leading technology to help you. Our technology has won multiple awards and is ranked #1 in usability and time to value on G2 Crowd. We also have a lot of other resources available, specifically on our website, ClientSuccess.com. I'd recommend visiting our blog, requesting a demo, getting in touch with us via the chat any way that you like. So once again, to all of our attendees, we thank you very much for joining us. Dave, any closing remarks?
No, thanks for everybody for joining us, and we look forward to engaging with you anytime. Please reach out. My contact information is here if you have any follow-up questions or if we can just help in any way. We love engaging with professionals throughout this space, and our objective is to build relationships that last, and so we hope to do that with you.